Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back. We're working on the Ranger again, just plugging away, trying to get as much as we can done. Getting dangerously close to getting this thing fired up for the first time. You know, we still have brake booster to put on. That's kind of holding me up from firing it up because the power steering pump needs to run. Until I get the lines hooked up to that, I don't want to run it and run it dry, otherwise they'll just leak right out. I suppose I could run a little jumper if I wanted to, just to get it running, but for now I'll just wait. But yeah, the brake booster, still waiting on that. We got wiring to do. I'll be working on that. Air intake, that shouldn't be too terribly tough. Get that wrapped up. A lot of little stuff. I got brake lines to make, but there again, waiting for the brake booster so I can mount the master cylinder and then run new brake lines. Also have the suspension to paint and install that stuff. Probably working on that too. So yeah, just a lot of little stuff yet to do yet, but man, I can feel it, we're getting close. Got the interior kind of to put back together and get that wired up. So kind of going through that today and just trying to get as much as we can done and get it closer to getting this thing fired up. So let's get to it. So I'm working with the second harness right now that comes with the control pack. Basically what I'm doing is I basically tore it all apart, pulled the loom off and everything, trying to clean up the wiring as best I can. The big issue is I don't want a big rat's nest under the hood. Basically it's going to plug in right down here on the ECM, and then some of it will go into through the firewall into the inside. The rest will be routed onto the engine or down to the starter or something. So I don't want just to shove it all in that corner and be done with it. So basically pull it all apart, trying to figure out, my firewall is going to be about right here, and a lot of these wires split out, further down or whatever. So I'm kind of rerouting them to come up here, and we'll retape it and everything. But basically we have this plugs into the engine harness, this plugs into the fuse block or panel, I guess you'd call it, and we have your OBD2 connector there, the plug for the pedal, and then also wires for the shifter. We got like the shift up, shift down, that sort of thing. So that'll have to be wired into that. We have our starter wire here, and then one plug here, that's for the alternator, and then we have our mass airflow. So basically just going through this, trying to figure out exactly where I want to have them split out and kind of test fitting it and stuff, and then we'll retape it and make it look nice and put it back in there. So that's what we're working on here. So most of the wiring is, at least on the outside here, is done. I have kind of the bigger 16 pin connectors kind of stuck in the corner here next to the fan. There again, I had mentioned that I kind of redid the harnesses to try and get in and just make it so it wasn't such a bundle of wires in this area, but got them in there pretty good. I still have a few wires here to connect. One is for the fan power, which I'm not going to be using, so that'll just be tucked up somewhere. Eventually I may use it if I want, but I already have the fan set up to be wired. I have a fuel pump power right here that I need to run, and I need to run a battery ground here. Working on putting the main battery fuse or cable up to this fuse here, so it can run everything. Everything else is kind of run off this side. Yeah, most of this is going to be wrapped up here real shortly. I also have the intake made up. I actually had some leftover tubing or intake pipe from my Fox body. It's 3.5 inch. It's the same size as the throttle body there, which is just a stock throttle body for 2016 F-150. So ended up having the elbow here. I just had to trim it a little bit shorter here so it wouldn't hit up the radiator support here, the core support. Ended up welding it together here and just trim this end here so it had more of a 90 bend on it. So, and I didn't want to shoot it down or back. So I ended up just welding it together, and then it just has a slight rake down and then turned out a little bit. This filter I had laying around too, maybe a little bit smaller than what I should have on here or want on here, but we're going to use it for the time being. But there is room to add a bigger filter here if I want, and maybe even enclose this so it gets fresh air, doesn't get heat from the engine bay, but that can be down the road. It actually fit pretty well. I was trying to figure out a way to somehow have a bracket out here to hold this. Right now it's just being held up by the hose clamps or the hose on that end. Obviously it's not that heavy, but we'll see if this thing moves up and down or settles. The biggest thing is I don't want it rubbing right down here on the heater hose or the hose clamp in here and rubbing through. So, but I think it'll be okay. It's clearing the radiator. And then I also had to put the mass airflow sensor in here, so I happen to have a chunk of just solid thick, what is that, 1/2 inch or something like that, flat aluminum. So I welded that on, and then I had to cut the hole on the inside for the sensor to go in there, you know, tapped a couple holes, and it fits on there pretty good. So I think it turned out okay. Eventually I want to paint this. I think I'm going to paint it orange to match the truck. I'd also like to get some covers here too for the coil packs that will go on here, but we'll do that down the road too. I just mainly would like to get this thing running and make sure everything works before I start making it look better or nicer. So, and also you can see I put heater hoses on here, so I got them hooked up. That was pretty easy. But as you can see, I got a bundle of wires here, kind of a mess right now with all the loom pulled off of it, but most of that wiring is running through the grommet and where the stock grommet was for the wiring harness. It all fits through there. We have the OBD2 port here that I have to run over to the other side and mount somewhere or figure out what I'm going to do with that. This wiring here is basically for the shifter. So we have shift up, shift down. We have the start. We have a shift common. I got to figure out what that is, and then we have ignition wire. And the other two are for a manual clutch switch, which we are not going to be using because it's an automatic. So don't have to worry about those two, but got to figure out where we're going to wire it. I already have the wires for the pedal assembly run across. I kind of ran it up through the dash up here, up along through the behind the radio, and then down to where the pedal is. They give you plenty of wire there. I didn't necessarily want to cut that wire, so I do have a lot of it bundled up kind of back in this corner here. Not ideal, but I just didn't want to have to splice it and then have issues with you know, if all of a sudden that connection or something gets bad or whatever, and then having throttle issues. So I just left it and bundled it up, kind of looped it up in the dash. So what else we're going to have to run over there? I'll run the OBD2 port connector here over on the kind of the same way, up across here and then down. What I plan on doing is I actually bought a cable here, kind of a splitter for the OBD2, so it'll plug in here, and then it's got 3 breakouts. I'm not going to necessarily need the one of them, but I for sure wanted 2 of them. One will plug into the speedometer, and the Dakota Digital speedometer box. That'll adapt right in here, and so that way it can run the speedometer for me. The other one's going to be just to be able to test for codes and stuff, and I don't know if I'll end up using the third one or not, but so I definitely wanted kind of a splitter there, so I wouldn't have to necessarily disconnect everything or disconnect the speedometer just to test for you know, codes and stuff. You know, like if I needed to do a road test or something and needed the speedometer to work while I'm testing it with a, you know, a scanner or something like that. So I wanted to make sure I had a splitter. So we'll see where I end up mounting that. I also have to hook up my wires here for the shifter. I'd love to be able to get all these to work. I'll get these all hooked up so I would have like the well, for sure I'm going to need to hook up the somehow get the brake switch hooked up to this little solenoid here, so I can that way it will come out of park. You know, when you put the foot on the brake, when the brake light comes on, it'll apply that solenoid there, and then I'll be able to pull it out of park there. I could, I suppose, just tie that, you know, so I wouldn't have to wire it up, but I'd like to have all that stuff working the way it's supposed to. So that'll probably just be a simple power and ground for that. You know, I'll have the shift up, shift down, hopefully. And I'm trying to think what else. Some of these we'll have to figure out what they all do, but I am getting a wiring schematic for a 2016 F-150. It should be here any day. That way I can actually kind of cross-reference the wiring with those parts versus, you know, the '89 Ranger. So it's kind of a mixed bag of wiring schematics, all trying to get it to work together. So if you guys have any questions on my wiring here, just let me know in the comments. You know, I can try and help you out if you're doing a similar thing. But here you can see that I have the module here for Dakota Digital, the sensor down on the transmission. It's got the, I think I've already shown this on one of my videos, but it's got the 3 leads that come here from the sensor. These here, the park, reverse, neutral, these wiring here is all for my lights that tell me what gear I'm in, or what, you know, if I'm in park or if I'm in overdrive or, you know, manual, whatever. That'll just operate the lights that are on the shifter here. Otherwise, it's got ignition wire, ground wire. The safety wire here is for like a neutral safety, and then it's got the backup here. So that sensor, when it's in reverse, will tell me, you know, to run the reverse lights. Hopefully that's got it wired up, but or works. But I'm kind of running off my wiring that I had here already hooked up, because I had the kind of fuse block ECM mounted in the behind the glove box here for the old engine. The ECM kind of sat here, and then there was a fuse block or panel that sat here. So I'm trying to reuse most of that wiring, and I think all of it is going to be reused. So yeah, that's being real helpful. I don't know wherever you would mount yours, that's up to you, but I did have to cut the glove box and modify that so it would actually close and not hit everything back here. So it does take up space on the old one. Now this running just this, I don't know if I would have had to cut it because it's a lot smaller, but with the older ECM, they're a lot bigger, and then that fuse panel that sat here was quite big, so I had to cut it down quite a bit. But so I have the wiring here almost hooked up. I got my fuel pump here that I'm actually running. I'm still running the inertia switch down here. I don't know if I can get this here, but the inertia switch sits here. So I have the main lead coming off the control pack for the new motor coming to here, and then from here it's running up to this power, which actually goes to the fuel pump, the main power lead to the fuel pump here. So you can kind of see I have the box for the speedometer kind of hidden up underneath here a little bit. This would be the driver's side, kind of where the clutch pedal would be. I still have to wire that up. You can see the wires just hanging here for now. That shouldn't be too difficult, but we'll get that situated here too. That does fit there somewhat decent. Okay, I should have most of the wiring done inside the cab here, I guess. I got the shifter wires connected here. Basically, there's 10 pins here, or 10 wires coming out of this connector. I'll be using half of them. Basically in number 3, which is the middle top here, and all of them along the bottom except for 6 down in this corner here, all get used. So total of 5 are getting used out of here. 2 of them, this number 3 is the power for the like like when you step on the brake pedal, it operates this solenoid right here to take it out of gear or out of park. So 3 and 7, so it basically, you know, from the left here, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, I think. But the center one is 3, and then the next one would be 7, are used for those two, basically power and ground. So I have that wired in to the brake switch, and that should work there. And then the other 3, basically 8, 9, and 10, are for the shift up, shift down, and then shift common, which is basically the ground, or, you know, just a shift common, I guess you'd call it. But the return signal from the positive, and or shift up and shift down. So easy enough. I was hoping to get the tow button maybe to work, but this isn't wired for it, and I'm fine with that, I guess. We don't necessarily need that to work, but so this should be wired up and good to go. I'm just going to put some loom on there here in a second. Here's the wiring schematic that Power by the Hour actually sent me on that connector. So basically we're using 3, 7, 8, 9, and 10 here. Kind of explains what each one here is, but so that was helpful that they sent that over. But otherwise, I should have everything kind of wired up in here, short of the check engine light. I got 2 wires kind of going to my light that's behind the dash over here, where the stock light is for the check engine light. Otherwise, for the most part, I do have the gauges kind of put back in here too. I don't need the radio in just yet, and I'll leave like the center console and stuff out too, and maybe do a little test runs first before I go putting all that back together, just in case I have something wired up wrong. But I think for the most part we're all kind of set up or wired in here. Yeah. So I always kind of struggle a little bit as far as how in depth I should get with the wiring. I don't want to bore you guys with you know, just monotonous wiring schematics and stuff like that, but I do have most of my wiring done now. Kind of got everything laid out. The control pack is pretty straightforward, I guess. Everything's somewhat basically labeled, so you can figure it out. So what I kind of learned too over the process of this is Ford Performance sells the control pack only for Mustang engines, not for the F-150. So being I bought it from Power by the Hour, this kit is basically theirs, so they must take the Ford Performance, basically modify it a little bit, modify the harnesses and stuff to fit on an F-150. So things are a little bit different, like the instructions they send along with it are for a Mustang and the Ford Performance. You kind of have to ask if you want to go in depth with the F-150 wiring and stuff like that, but I should have everything basically wired up and ready to go, short of just doing a little bit of adjustments on like the speedometer and some of the other stuff, just to make sure it's set up and ready to go. The other thing is that I haven't done it yet, but the control pack, the F-150, or at least from Power by the Hour, it does not come with a check engine light option, I guess. So what I plan on doing is Dakota Digital sells a STA 1000, I think is the part number. It's similar to that module that I have in the dash here. I have a light here, but you might be able to see it. So it's similar to this module here, and it's basically made for the speedometer and a tachometer to run, and it also has a check engine light option on it. So I'd basically only be buying it for that one wire option on there, but it would just plug into the OBD2 port, and then I would just run a hot wire off of that, or I think it supplies a ground off of that module. So I would just have to hook it up to an idiot light in the dash, which I had beforehand, and then I could get that to work. So that's one thing I just want to at least be able to have that option, you know, so if something is going on, at least it throws a light, and you can always hook up to it and see what's actually going on. So I went and got all my suspension control arms and rotors kind of painted. You can see these are painted and somewhat assembled, and then I kind of did the hat on the rotor here, just for looks more than anything, and just so they're not rusting. But I wanted to get this mocked up here, so I started installing this front suspension here on the driver's side. I got to start plotting out exactly what I'm going to be doing for brake lines, how I'm going to, get to the caliper itself, and, just get where I'm going to mount it so they're not going to hit anything. There's, going to be clearance for steering. I could have bought a kit or a hose kit with these. I wasn't sure if the old ones would have worked on here. They're a little bit different connection here. I guess this is a pipe fitting on this caliper, where the old ones were more of a banjo style fitting on there. So I'm going to have to just buy a kit, but I got to figure out, what length I need to use here for a hose, kind of where I'm going to mount it, because I need to put a T here somewhere to run across the other side. I also have the line lock that I had previously on there, and where I'm going to mount that is just kind of sitting up in here right now out of the way, but I'll probably mount that somewhere in this area and then run it to the T, and then I can run the hose off of here, and then I'll have to run a hard line across to the other side. Most likely I'll do that, kind of sneak it over the top of the frame rail here, or maybe just under the bottom here, and run that across the front cross member here and to the other side. But just trying to figure out where all that's going to fit, so I started to install this suspension. I also need to figure out, I got to hook up my main battery cable for the alternator and run that across to the other side. As far as that, I didn't want to necessarily run the alternator over to this where the fuse was, because there's so much kind of wired in here to begin with. So I figured I'll just go right to the starter down here. So I was trying to debate whether I should just go on across the back side of the motor and then come up, which I might do, but I haven't decided if I'll come across the front cross member here and then underneath and kind of come back. I'm trying to keep away from the headers as much as possible there, so just trying to figure all that routing out, just trying to get everything assembled or keep going and get what I can done here. So but I think for the most part I can get all this assembled and it won't necessarily be in my way. Kind of getting all that wrapped up, so I'll probably put the rotors and the bearings and everything on there. I don't think I'll have the wheel on just yet, but my plan is to hopefully align this myself, just because the way the adjustment is, if I'm off quite a bit, I don't want to sit there and take all that time on the alignment rack and getting charged for it, somewhere else, having someone do it professionally, I guess if you call it. So I'm going to try and get this as close as possible and then just have them double check it once I'm all done. But yeah, I'll probably get that what is it, 10-Holzen alignment system. I was kind of looking at online. It's not too expensive, so I might do that and just try and get that aligned. But yeah, we'll get the caster camber and the toe as close as possible, or what I think is as possible, and then just have them double check it. So also, one of the last kind of things I needed to wire up was the battery cable that came off the alternator and basically charge the system. So I have it kind of run down on the other side of the suspension here, straight down on the cross member. Kind of see it comes right there and shoots across. I'm also going to do that with the brake line too. I'm going to shoot it in that same spot. I just ran it across over here and comes up right there, and then just goes right to the starter. And then basically the starter cable, main battery that goes to the starter, just goes up to that fuse block up here. I also wanted to show you this, guys. This is the stock cross member basically that sits underneath the transmission. You can see this hole here is actually where the twin I-beam strut or support, I guess. I don't know what that part of the suspension is called, but this would run up to the I-beam this would be the passenger side. But you can see obviously a two-piece, just overlaps. But I did find out that this is actually going to fit. I originally was just going to make my own cross member you know, maybe just use the ends of them or make my own ends or something. But this actually clears everything, the exhaust and all that stuff clears. So I just put a little paint on it, and I'm gonna put it back in there. I kind of show you, I did have to modify it. So right here, you had 2 bolts kind of sitting right here. And then this came out further. But this was out about that far, I suppose. And you can kind of see it did kind of shoot straight up where that other hole is. So I cut it off just after that first hole and then just kind of angled it a little bit, just for a little bit more clearance under there. But and the other thing is I had to, the first hole I had to remove just because, let's see if I can get down here. So the back hole is here. The other hole was right where I cut the frame rail, so there's nothing there now. Plus it angles, you know, straight where this was going up. And being I had to weld on that and go straight right there, I would have had to just kind of bend it. So I just trimmed it off. But so you have this hole, this one back here, and then that one, so 3 on each side. That will be able to bolt it on, and it clears all this underneath here. I'll get a picture of that here shortly once I bolt it up, but it does work as long as you kind of put everything in place just right. Clears nicely. So instead of having to build another one, I'll just reuse this and save me a little bit of money and time of fabricating a different one. So see if I can show you this here. So now I got the cross member all bolted up, and you can see there's clearance all the way around the transmission, and the exhaust all clear, so should work out pretty good. Like I said, just had to kind of trim the front a little bit and get rid of that first bolt, and it works fine. So all right, I'm going to wrap the video up there, guys. The only real big thing left to do is do the brake booster. That'll be next video here. I got actually a little story about that too, so stay tuned for that. Until next time, guys, we'll see you later. Thanks.